Welcome to Her Unscripted, episode 11. I will be discussing my upbringing as a Muslim Palestinian American. I am a Palestinian American who is also Muslim. I lived in both Palestine and America, and I can openly say that I've never fit in entirely as a Palestinian or entirely as an American. I was born in the US in Coral Springs, Florida, and I was number five out of eight kids. And shortly after I was born and my sister was born, my parents decided to move to Palestine, which was a beautiful time to move there. It was like 1994 when we moved, and the situation between Palestine and Israel was very calm, nothing that you would like feel. We knew Israelis existed and that they were in their side and in settlements. We never really interacted. We knew the Israeli soldiers, but it was otherwise a very peaceful time. And it was really beautiful. I will say that we never fit in as like truly Palestinians there. We were always the American kids in Silwad, where we lived, which is where my family is from, both my parents. And my parents really insisted on us speaking English at home when we lived in Palestine to maintain the strength of language, and sent us to schools, private schools that focus on both English and Arabic. And they were schools in the city. My mom just wanted a specific academic experience for us that really kept our English strong enough to continue education here in the US. So I never fit in with my Palestinian cousins in Palestine as much as I felt like I was Palestinian or I am Palestinian. I was always the American cousin. People could tell from our accents a mile away, although I spoke great Arabic. And I think at the time, Arabic came to me before English. I had like a very strong Palestinian accent that I see videos of myself. I spoke like a true Palestinian from the suburbs. And it was a beautiful upbringing. It really was. Our summers were always spent in Florida because my dad always worked here. So we always had a home here. And our summers were here, and then we'd go back to Palestine. And it was a normal routine. I felt like it was normal. I never really felt comfortable around Americans here. I knew I was different. I knew Americans lived different than we did. They were more open. I'm Muslim. We had rules. But I was always intrigued by Americans. When I was younger years, I did camps in America, and I wanted so badly to wear the short skirts and short shorts, and I fought enough till a certain age to wear them. And then it was a hell no. And then I'd go back to Palestine and go back to being a Palestinian. And it was a beautiful life. It was really cool. We played in the streets. It was very, very peaceful until one day it was no longer peaceful. And I was in school. I was in fifth grade, and I was at the Friends Girls School. It's a Quaker school in Ramallah, and I was in that school. My sister Hala was there, and my brother Muhammad was in like the pre-K there. And we heard a lot of chaos going on. It was just a lot of like screaming. We heard Hebrew, so we knew the Israelis had come to Ramallah, which is not something that happens. And I don't know what got into. I was only in fifth grade, but I looked out the window and all I could see are snipers. Actually, they were Israeli soldiers that were wearing the sniper hat at the gate of the school. And all I could think is my brother Muhammad's class is right by that gate. I can't let anything happen to my brother. I mean, really, who the hell was I? I was in fifth grade, but I think the older sister naturally, you have this protectiveness. And Hela, I knew was way more safe. She was in the back part of the school. And I look at my friend Kareem, who's a family friend, and I was like, distract the teacher. I have to go get my siblings. Like, I'm leaving the class. So distract the teacher. And, because obviously the rules we were like under, like, no one leaving classrooms, all that kind of stuff. And I ran out and I run past where the gate and the snipers were, and they're yelling, and the gate security guard is yelling at me because they all have their guns out and they're trying to get through this metal gate. And the security guards are trying to stop them, saying, "There's no one here. It's all kids. This school are all little kids." The oldest class was fifth grade, and they were just not listening. And I grabbed my brother Muhammad and I run after getting him. So cute. He had like a mushroom haircut, bouncy hair. Run to Hela's classroom, grab her, and we run to back to my class. And I just knew I needed them with me. And at that point, we're trying to figure out, how do we get home? We don't live in the city. We live, I mean, without checkpoints, like maybe 20 minutes from the city. But God knows what was happening around Ramallah. Ramallah was shut down. And the school gets a call from my mom because everything was shut down around Ramallah. No one can leave or enter Ramallah. And my mom's freaking out. How many of her kids were in Ramallah? 6 of her kids were in Ramallah. Her first child's in America at this point, and the youngest is a baby at home. So imagine 6 out of your 8 kids are in a war zone. There's no exit. It's literally just, there's a shutdown. You can't get your kids. There's nothing you could do. And at that point, my mom's like, okay, Dina, you and the kids, you go home with Kareem. And I mean, I don't know why I thought that was so cool that I could go to Kareem's house. I remember thinking that. The older siblings all went to our friend's house in the Mizra because our town specifically was extra shut down. So that was, I mean, we were all split up. The family split. I spent a few nights with my younger siblings at Kareem's house, and my older siblings were somewhere else, which I had no idea. Luckily, Kareem's mom's was my mom's best friend, so she was on the phone with her until they cleared the roads and we were able to get back into Silwad, which was the beginning of the end for us living in Palestine. It was the beginning of us spending our last year living there. And it was the beginning of no longer experiencing a peaceful life as a child. I think it stole a lot of innocence from us. And it created this extreme pride of being a Palestinian. I think for my siblings and I, that created an attachment, a lifelong attachment to Palestine. I mean, even our cousins would always ask us, why do you guys like going to Palestine? Because everyone knew it wasn't this like big travel plans compared to them, which were traveling to Dubai or Jordan, or like, we just wanted to spend our entire summers in Palestine, and we were so proud of it and we loved it. But it was the beginning of a very beautiful childhood. And unfortunately, I experienced a lot of scary moments that I shouldn't have experienced I mean, how old are you when you're in 5th grade? Like 12? Yeah, like between 10 and 12, probably something like that. And I, we experienced checkpoints that became violent. We were under house arrest with threats of them, them as in the Israeli soldiers, you know, breaking down our homes and taking them, threats of, if you go to on the balcony of your house, you'll get shot. They would drive around Silwad with speakers singing certain songs and chants that we had, pretty much trying to piss people off to come out so it could start a fight. we were running out of food during certain times, and it was a very scary place. I remember the first time my dad came to visit us after the Intifada started, which is what the uprising, which was happened. We were so excited. My dad's coming. We haven't seen him in a while. He pulls up, and the soldiers pull up right behind him and are trying to stop him. And he's telling them, "Oh, this is my house, this is my gate, and we're all going to the balcony, and like our land, like it's all gated." And we're so excited, and the soldiers start throwing on all of us kids, it was me and the younger siblings, smoke bombs. And it hit right next to my sister Asil, who started fainting, who at the time was not even like a year and a half. And so those experiences were not nice. I eventually, went back to school, and, certain kids weren't showing up anymore. And going to school from Silwat to Ramallah, like we'd get into our taxi and then get dropped off at a checkpoint because the car couldn't go, and then we had to walk a certain point, and then another taxi would have to come get us. And then sometimes there were shootings, sometimes there were chasing. It became very chaotic. And you know but it was still so beautiful to us. And it my grandma was there, both grandmas were there, and it was just so beautiful. So that year we pack the house and we go to America thinking things will calm down and we'll come back, but we ended up only hearing worse news. And my mom and my dad knew that they couldn't live another day not knowing what will happen to their kids if they sent them to school. I mean, it's not a life to live, right? It's not. What parent wants to experience that? What parent wants their child to experience that? What child wants to experience that? We were so heartbroken that we weren't going back, but they tried to excite us that we were moving to Dubai for 2 years, which was very cool, you know. I think we quickly learned that a big family with the mentality that my family had are not made for the Dubai lifestyle, especially trying to instill certain work ethics and discipline like my family did. Like, I'll never forget when I was in Dubai and I was grounded, and my friend's like, "Oh, so what? Your mom's not going to drop you off? I'll send you my driver." And I was like, "Hell yeah, like that's the life." So that definitely wasn't made for us, and not for my parents. And we quickly moved back to America from there and never went back to Palestine to live. We eventually went back to Palestine in the summers. But the transition from Palestine to Dubai and then America was a traumatic experience for me. Arrived here in eighth grade. So I was technically like 13 years old, or 12, 13, something like that, or 13, 14, I don't know, but not like the best age of transitioning from a Muslim, not even Muslim, because I grew up in Catholic schools too, but where religion was implemented, culture was heavily implemented. I'm Palestinian. I grew up in a very comfortable environment and sheltered environment, to come to an American public school in Parkland, Florida, in what year was that? Like 2002, maybe 2003. And this is post 9/11, which is another transition and impact on someone like me. I thought I was an alien sitting in the classroom. I thought, mind you, I looked very similar to like now, where I wasn't wearing the hijab at that point. Everyone that sees me thinks I'm Spanish, so I don't know what the hell I was feeling inside, but typical teenage feelings of I'm out of place. I don't know how to talk to these people. I just would look around me like I am an outcast. And the way the kids were talking to each other and cursing, or at that time everyone's trying to curse, or the boys are trying to hit on the girls. And then the worst, I mean, it's not the worst, it's just kind of funny, but I remember thinking it was the worst moment of my life. This girl bent down and, low rise jeans were in, and she bent down and her thong was showing. And I've never seen that image in my life. I was like, we're all going to hell. Like, this is so bad. This is so haram. What is going on? And I remember her being like the pretty girl. She was not nice to me. And it's okay because now, oh, I don't want to say anything mean. She wasn't nice to me. And it was just such an interesting experience. It was so interesting. I didn't know. I don't know. I didn't feel like I fit in, and I look at myself, like at pictures of myself then. I was like, wow, I so fit in. Like I didn't look any different. But yeah, I thought I was an absolute outsider, and my parents put on the same rules that I grew up with, right? So that entailed no boys, no hanging out with people that don't follow the same rules that we do, right? So, I mean, I wasn't allowed to hang out with boys. That cut out a lot of hangouts that I was ever invited to. I, didn't really, and when you have siblings, you don't need to socialize with the outside world. So we definitely leaned on each other, but I was the only one in middle school at the time. My sister Lana was in Douglas, and she had it really tough. She was hijabi. What grade was she in? I think 11th grade at the time. Yeah, 11th grade. And she made sure she got into dual enrollment and like graduated early. She even played tennis there, but she had it really tough. People were not very kind to her. I mean, again, Parkland, Florida, you don't expect, especially at that time, a lot of education on someone that maybe looks and dresses a little differently. America, yeah, we call ourselves the melting pot, but we never treated everyone right in this melting pot. We just looked good for pictures. And then I got into high school, typical teenage, like, thought process. Life is so hard, whatever. And one thing that was always interesting to me, especially the first year, was 9/11 came around, right? And I wanted the floor to swallow me every time 9/11 was mentioned. I felt like I wanted to stand up in the middle of class and apologize to every single person that was in my class. And this is 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade. I felt so uncomfortable. I thought all eyes were on me because I shared the same religion as the people that supposedly hijacked the airplanes and caused 9/11. I felt so guilty. I felt so uncomfortable. And, that added a lot too. And then in like, we'd leave to Palestine, we'd come back, you almost go get some comfort of who you are. And then you'd come back here a little bit confused and not sure where you fit in all over again. And then go back to Palestine, have these amazing summers, and then come back here trying to blend these two worlds that defined you that weren't very blendable, right? So that was a whole whirlwind. And then I decided to put the hijab on, which created a whole new experience in my life. And I wore it in the midst of high school in Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. And I put it on, walked in more confident than I ever walked in before, which is weird. I blended in so well prior, and I stood out with the hijab like a sore thumb. And yet that brought me so much comfort. I think knowing who I was and not needing to explain who I was brought me comfort. I'm not sure exactly. I didn't have bad experiences with the hijab. I had very ignorant comments towards the hijab. I remember it was around 9/11, and this is the worst experience I ever had, I think. And I was in AP Psych. I was never met for an AP class. Let's just say that. But I was in AP Psych, and the teacher tells the whole classroom, and this is obviously September 11th timing, so school just started a few weeks prior, to close their eyes. And I was newly hijabi. Should everyone close your eyes? Now imagine yourself on an airplane. In my head, I'm like, where the hell is this going? Now imagine someone covered walks in, and two men who are of Middle Eastern descent and clearly Muslim, saying words that include Allah. Now everyone open your eyes and tell me how you feel. This was her experiment. And all I heard was, I'd knock them out. I'd pull the scarf off of her head. I would try to hijack the plane and kill them. I would fight them and kick them off the airplane. And I'm sitting there newly in my hijab, and I just didn't even know how to react. I got up and I walked out of the classroom, and I was bawling. I was like, what is this life? Like, where are we living? Why is it like this? And I'm such a peaceful person when it comes to culture and I mean, I'm Palestinian, and there could be, with my experience as a Palestinian as a child, there could have been a lot of hate that was developed towards Israelis. And at the time there was none. So I couldn't understand how a country can be okay with their school system teaching this. And I went to another teacher that I was very comfortable with, and I just started crying to him, and I told him what happened, and he went off and he actually talked to the principal for me. And that teacher came and apologized to me, and they pulled me out of her class. The students were saying all this ugly stuff and looking at me and laughing, and I was just like, how are people this cruel? Like, I just didn't know how to handle that. Another experience, was once a kid like walked by me and pulled my hijab off. It's a violation of someone's space. It's a violation of my body. If we want to talk, just because it didn't turn into full-on sexual assault, it doesn't mean it doesn't count towards that, because that's a huge violation for me. And, it was a lot of those experiences. I think high schoolers suck, middle schoolers suck. I think our school system, is very, implements ignorance, because we even went over geography, and then we went around the subject of Palestine. Well, technically, 1948, it was switched from Palestine to Israel. I'm Palestinian. So the topic was, what are Palestinians? Who are they? Do they exist? And the answer was, they do not exist. There's Palestinian territories, but there aren't Palestinians. You could say, like, on the paperwork, you're from a Palestinian territory, but they were trying to explain there's no such thing as Palestinian. So what am I? What am I? What do I put? Who do I say I am? So it created a lot of confusion, because I go back to my home and I'm in Palestine, and I am Palestinian, and I live on Palestinian land, and I'm from Silwad, and I wear a beautiful Palestinian thobe every chance I get. Everything about me resembles Palestine. Everything I think about being Palestinian every part of my day. And I know we're supposed to lead with our religion, and I'm supposed to think more Muslim first, but I think of both every day. Palestine's engraved in my heart. I lived through very traumatic experiences there as a child. It's engraved in me. And then I'm coming here and I'm going through the education system that is telling me that we don't exist. That wasn't easy. But the friends around me, the people that got to know me, always knew and respected where I was from. And that I always loved. Going into college, I was comfortable. I was good. I never really experienced anything ugly. It wasn't bad for me. I worked in Boca Mall, and I didn't experience anything too bad. I mean, it's funny, my friends or my younger sisters who were around me and would experience the stares I would get were more impacted by that than I was. I never felt it as a negative thing. There's times where I'd stare back and be like, can I help you? And that would the little old women would be like, like, look away. Like, where do I look? Otherwise, I've never minded someone asking me a question like, what is Palestine? Where is Palestine? If you're genuinely ignorant to that topic, I'd love to educate and talk about it. But then there's some people, like my sister experienced the other day, someone said, where is Palestine? And you're a grown ass man. You know exactly where Palestine is. It's 2026 right now. The October 7 Gaza situation has been going on for 3 years now. Everyone and their mother knows what Palestine is, what a Muslim is, what Gaza is, what Israel is, what the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is. So stop with the bullshit of I don't know what's going on. I'm not into it. Even the friends that I had that always wanted to be like very neutral politically, which I can sound very neutral politically, and I believe in being that way so we could all respect each other's existence. No, what's right is right, what's wrong is wrong. If someone's doing something wrong, we could easily call it out. If Palestine and Palestinians exist, doesn't matter, you're American, Cuban, Haitian, wherever you're from, Palestinians exist, just like we all exist. So that bullshit, I'm just over it. If you're talking like that, you're not meant to, be in today's day and age and be part of mainstream and society and even a professional career because you're too ignorant for that. I mean, in high school, I remember coming back because you come back from Palestine extra proud, like you and a lot of people, I don't know if it was during those years, like every kid that came from a different country had their flag on their bags, like you saw the Colombian flags and the Cuban flags and everyone, but I'd come from Palestine. My flag came from Palestine. My keychains came from Palestine with me. I came back like extra like equipped, with keychains. And I remember sitting down and this girl comes in giving off very similar vibes to me with her bag, and like you hear all the keychains like chick, chick, chick. And she puts her bag and we're literally sitting next to each other, and you look at my keychains and it's like Handala, which is a little kid, and then you see the Palestinian flag. I think I even had a Silwad keychain, and then the Hatta, the kufiya, I had it wrapped around. And then you look at her bag, and it was so funny. And it was a bunch of Israeli flags. And we're literally giving off the same vibe. And she just moved from Israel. And I had just left Palestine. And she looks at my bag, and I look at her bag, and our eyes catch. And eventually we started chatting, and I mean, she lived there. Her sister was in the IDF, which was very difficult for me because, the concept of the IDF is, to be even related to someone in the IDF is just hard for me to accept. It's a military that I can't see any humanistic or human characteristics implemented in them. I look at them as, I do look at them as a villain in every story. It's destructive what they've done, what they're doing, and it's just too much for me to handle. But so that hit me hard when I heard that her sister was in the IDF. But then we started talking about different places in Palestine, Israel, whatever we want to call it. Like we both tried to call it Jerusalem so we don't offend each other, which is very interesting. It shouldn't be offensive, but I respect it, what we both did there. We became very good friends. We became best friends. And one day she called me, and because we'd get into political conversations at times and it would get a little too frustrated because as an Israeli kid, she never experienced Palestinians. So me and this Israeli girl became close friends, but we talked about things like she never experienced a Palestinian prior to me. So imagine our childhoods on the same land. She was a few miles away, drivable distance, very close actually when we really looked at things. And she's never, she's seen Palestinians from far. She's heard of them. She would forget that Palestinians existed. But me, on the other hand, I knew exactly where the Israelis lived. I saw the Israeli settlers take over the streets randomly because they wanted to. We'd get threats that they were coming through the city of Silwad because they can and they wanted to. And we all know Israeli settlers, if you just Google them, they're psychos that are roaming the streets like they have lost their mind with guns. I experienced the IDF with AK-47s that are pointed at me and at my classmates and my siblings. And I experienced trying to go to school and them taking me out of the car and us having to go back. And they were part of my, not just my everyday, multiple times during the day. And then you look at this girl and she never experienced a Palestinian. She never experienced a war zone, but we're in the same land. I was so confused and I was very initially frustrated with her ignorance. Because I'm like, what? Come on, you see how unfair this situation is. But just as like an 18-year-old at the time, at this point, like later on in our friendship and our relationship, I realized, you can't hold people accountable for their experience, but we could only hold people accountable for what they do with the knowledge that's given to them, right? What they do with the education they get. It wasn't her fault that she had a great upbringing and had a very peaceful upbringing and never thought of war. Just like it wasn't my fault, but it was the cards that we were dealt. And one day she called me and she was like emotional and she was like, it's not fair what you went through. It's not fair that this is your experience. It's not fair that what my people did to you. And gosh, I'll never forget those words. I got chills. I'm not saying that she had to say that to me because she's not responsible for the bad doing of bad people, just like I'm not responsible for the bad doing of bad people that are of the same religion as me or from the same country. But those were two human souls with such different experiences in the same like little space on this world, and we're able to connect on what's right and what's wrong within our own people. And when you talk to a Palestinian or an Israeli, there's a lot of pride. It's very hard for a Palestinian or an Israeli to admit to their flaws to one another because of the history and the pain in our souls. And I say ours, and mine's not, I haven't experienced an eighth of what the people of Palestine have experienced, and then now with the people of Gaza and what has the horrendous images that we've all witnessed. I actually spent my marathon thinking about that most of the time and how I'm able to choose to sign up for a marathon, just pure choice to go through the torture of that. Like, what a life I live versus the 5-year-olds that had to amputate all their limbs and will never experience walking. Like the privilege we have is just absolutely insane. But I don't know if I'm going on a rant about all of this or, I think as a Palestinian American, as a Muslim American, even if you don't choose to, if you're naturally not political like myself, you're born into politics and you're born into justifying your existence and justifying your innocence and explaining it. It's an unfair world to kind of fall into. We do live in a better space since TikTok has allowed the world to truly see what is going on in that region. and what people are truly experiencing versus back in the day where like I'd want to explain what Palestinians are going through, but there was no evidence other than CNN and Fox News and whatever you're told by your parents and your teachers, which was very filtered. Now there's not one person that hears that I'm Palestinian that like doesn't know what to say or like apologizes for what's going on or apologizes for the ignorance they always lived through. You know, there's no justification for ignorance now, but you're a walking political sign for people. You're as soon, you know, you're just born into it. I don't know how else to explain it. You're a controversy. You know, imagine like Muslim and Palestinian. Like, what the hell were my parents thinking? Like, what kind of mix is that? That's like the most controversial setup you could be in and live in America and live in this world. And you know, I could go on and on about this topic because it's my everyday, it's my every thought, it's what I experience in life, and I'm very proud of who I am, like, and it's so nice to experience the world being a little bit more open-minded and educated on who we are. But yeah, welcome to a little glimpse of what I experience, and I hope it helps you understand me a little bit more.